Welcome back to our Medicine and Faith podcasts, the podcast where we explore intersection between medicine and faith, our Catholic faith. I'm your host, Dr. Raul Enad from Cadenza Medical Clinic, Ave Maria, Florida. And today we're delving into the topic that connects the physiology of exercise with something deeper, its role in corporal mortification. Not only the effects on the body, on immune function, and also to our soul, and how our physical discipline can become a form of spiritual purification. So let's lace up both our running shoes and our interior discipline and dive in. Welcome. Historically, corporal mortification has been seen as a way to discipline the body in order to elevate the soul, even physical labor as a means to purify themselves from sin and draw closer to God. It's all about God. Exercise can be used and can be elevated if we put a transcendental meaning of our exercise. Offer it up is what they say, especially when done with intentionality. But even while our hearts may be lifted in sacrifice, our souls purified, our bodies are experiencing a fascinating transformation. So let's take a look at the science behind aerobic exercise. What is aerobic exercise? Aerobic exercise literally means with oxygen, as opposed to anaerobic exercises, which is without oxygen. And this is in any physical activity that increases your heart rate and respiratory rate in a way that promotes oxygen delivery into each individual cell of the body that makes up tissue system from the hair to the toe. Examples: simple: jogging, running, biking, dancing, anything that would increase your heart rate and your respiratory rate. As your heart pumps faster, your lungs work harder to oxygenate your blood, fueling your muscles for sustained effort, and even the brain to help concentrate. So when you engage in aerobic activity, your body primarily uses the oxidative phosphorylation energy system. This system taps into glucose from carbohydrates and fatty acids from stored fat. So the mitochondria, often called the powerhouse of the cell, use oxygen to efficiently convert these fuels to ATP, your body's energy currency. This is slow but sustainable energy, perfect for long-distance effort or zone 2 training, which we are going to discuss, the different zones. So a practical tip: as we're using fatty acids, when we exercise, if you want to lose the visceral fat, exercise while fasting so that you'll be using up the fatty acids first before you tap the glucose so that the visceral fat will melt. Do not monitor your weight, because sometimes your weight might not decrease as noted because it's not really the fatty acid or the visceral fat that only contributes to the weight. It might be transformed into muscle formation. That's why you might notice weight gain or not losing weight. It is your waistline, the visceral fat, would decrease. So what are the adaptations of training, of aerobic training? There's two different types or categories: central adaptations, heart and circulation, and peripheral adaptations for muscles and cells. So let's get into the central adaptations. What happens when you exercise or aerobic exercise? You increase stroke volume. That means the heart pumps faster in volume, more blood per beat. So more blood goes to the cell, especially the muscles and the brain. There will be improved circulation. Arteries become more elastic, more compliant, and blood pressure improves. So there will be more oxygen going to the tissue. In the mitochondrial level, there's increased mitochondrial density. There's what you call biogenesis, mitochondrial biogenesis, meaning the mitochondria duplicates or triplicates. You will have more mitochondria or more powerhouse in each cell. For example, a renowned athlete will have 2,100 mitochondria in the muscle cell, as opposed to his competitor, which is about 500. So who has the benefit? He has more endurance because he can endure long distance because of more efficient mitochondria in each cell, especially the muscles and the brain. So there's better fat oxidation efficiency. So the fat melts. You will lose your fat. And also, fat is also an efficient fuel, especially in the brain. So you become more focused. There will be increased or enhanced glucose transport into the muscles. So you will be able to run faster, you walk faster, and you'll be enjoying your exercise more. These adaptations don't just make you a better runner or cyclist or swimmer, they transform your body into a more efficient, resilient vessel, so it becomes more metabolically active. Let's move on to cardiovascular and immune benefits of exercise. When you do aerobic exercise, it increases the parasympathetic tone. This is your friend. Sympathetic or fight-flight is not your friend. It gives you more inflammation. It prohibits or decreases your ability to absorb nutrients in the intestine. It destroys the microbiome. That's the sympathetic role. Mood, you become anxious, angry, while parasympathetic, you're more calm, you're more compassionate, and you're nutritionally healthy. A well-trained heart actually beats slower at rest. So this is your rest and digest system, as opposed to the fight-flight of the sympathetic tone. Exercise boosts lymphocyte activity. The lymphocyte, or the one of the white blood cells, other than the neutrophils and macrophages, lymphocyte produces antibodies. The T lymphocytes, for example, forms antibody to the fungus, to the virus, to the tumor cells, while the B lymphocytes specifically produces antibodies to the bacteria. There's another form of lymphocytes called natural killer cells, or NK cells. They don't produce antibody, but their sole purpose is to usurp or to digest right away foreign bodies like the virus, tumor cells, bacteria, or fungus. There's reduced systemic inflammation. It has been noted that when you exercise, regular movement or regular exercises lowers the markers of inflammation such as CRP and interleukin-6. What about the brain? What about the brain, the mood, and the BDNF? What is BDNF? Brain-derived neurotrophic factor. Very important. It's like a fertilizer. Exercise raises the level of your BDNF. This is like a fertilizer to the brain. It promotes memory and learning. It promotes emotional regulation, and it promotes a sense of well-being among many different neurotransmitters when you exercise. Higher BDNF also is linked to greater motivation for future exercise. So the more positive effects that will come in, you will reap more benefits, which explains why movement becomes addictive. Exercise gives you acute high, and I'll explain later, but it will also promote the propensity for you to exercise more. So just do one step and you are there on the way to success. But let's not forget the mood benefits. Aerobic exercise naturally increases dopamine and serotonin, making it a potent antidepressant. Neurotransmitter like norepinephrine and noradrenaline increases alertness, increases your focus, attention, and energy. There's a good study focusing on the effect of exercise on memory and mood. In this study, they concluded that if you exercise 40 minutes daily with aerobic capacity of 60 to 80%, your memory improves. The hippocampus, which is the seat of memory and joy, increases in volume, and the center for anxiety, which is amygdala, decreases. So there's no more master control of anxiety. The 6 substances that increase when you exercise is anandamide. Sometimes it's called the bliss molecule. It binds to cannabinoid receptors in the brain. Does it make sound familiar? Cannabinoid. It's like smoking marijuana, but you don't want to do that. You don't need marijuana to have a bliss, to have a good mood. Exercise, because anandamide is increased when you exercise. So anandamide reduces anxiety. It promotes a calm feeling and contributes to the euphoric sensation during exercise. Another substance is glutamate. It's a neuroexcitatory, but it supports cognition and brain function when balanced. Next is GABA, or gamma-aminobutyric acid. It acts primarily as an inhibitory neurotransmitter that calms the nervous system. It helps reduce anxiety and promote relaxation post-exercise. Exercise is very relaxing. Exercise, once again, helps reduce anxiety, and that also improves your mood, your depression. Exercise increases lactate. We thought of this as a waste product, but actually, lactate serves as a fuel for the brain and stimulates BDNF production. Exercise increases growth hormone and testosterone. So it increases essentially with high intensity exercise. So that HIIT exercise that you like, do it. That increases your testosterone and growth hormone. What about immune function and exercise? What happens? What are the benefits of exercise in immune function? It enhances immune cell circulation. We're talking about the lymphocytes. We're talking about the neutrophils. So the blood flow increases when you exercise, which mobilizes immune cells. The natural killer cells, which is the lymphocytes, the T cells, and the neutrophils, are temporarily released in the bloodstream. To make a picture of this, these natural killer cells or T cells or the neutrophils, it behaves like a bat in the endothelium, hanging in the circulation, in the blood vessels. When you exercise, they are released and becomes a police. They will be looking for virus, for the tumor cells that they can scavenge. So exercise is an immune booster. So these cells survey tissues for pathogens and tumors effectively when you exercise. What about anti-inflammatory effects? What is the mechanism of exercise in anti-inflammation? It leads to reduced production of pro-inflammatory cytokine, the interleukin-6, tumor necrosis alpha, and from the adipose tissue. Let alone the adipose tissue, the fat also decreases or melts when you exercise. So you'll have less of those inflammatory markers. Exercise increases production of anti-inflammatory cytokines, example interleukin-10. And further, it reduces CRP levels, which is another inflammatory marker. Exercise strengthens your first line of defense against airborne pathogens. Exercise has an effect on hormetic stress and adaptation. Exercise creates a mild temporary stress on the body, increased temperature, oxidative stress, and cortisol, which triggers adaptive responses, which is good. It increases resilience of immune cells to stress. Exercise stimulates antioxidant systems like the glutathione. That is why glutathione and vitamin C together are also good supplements to boost your immune function because these are needed for antioxidation. But exercise enhances the antioxidant system like vitamin C and glutathione. Exercise trains the immune system to recover more efficiently and respond more robustly to future threats. But important caveat, like anything that you do in excess, like food or rest, too much exercise can suppress immunity. When prolonged high-intensity training without recovery, like cycling for long distance or marathon, overtraining syndrome, it increases cortisol levels. It suppresses lymphocyte production and even the function. That's why it raises the risk of upper respiratory tract infection. So beware. Do moderate exercise for your health and for your soul, because too much of anything is vanity, bad for your soul. So let's talk about the training zones for recovery at red line. So what is the maximum heart rate? The usual formula is 220 minus your age. So let's take an individual at 60 years old. Recovery or warm-up or zone 1 is about 50 to 60% of your maximum heart rate. It is a gentle, conversational pace, ideal for warm-ups, cool-downs, and active recovery. Zone 2 or 60% to 70% is best for fat burning and mitochondrial biogenesis. Zone 3 is 7 to 80%. It builds endurance, mental resilience, and improves lactate clearance. And at these, your heart rate should be around 128 to 130 beats per minute. Zone 4, or 80 to 90%, it increases VO2 max, enhances anaerobic threshold, ideal for interval training, or HIIT. At this, your heart rate is about 144 beats per minute. At Zone 5, 90 to 100%, which is the maximum effort, improves lactate tolerance, glucose management, and phosphocreatine recovery. So you're about 144 beats per minute. But you should do this Zone 5 or Zone 4, Zone 5 sparingly. Stay within 60 to 80%, 78 to 80% of your maximum heart rate. Each zone has its purpose, and each can be an offering of the will, a death to comfort, and in some cases, a prayer in motion. So, for example, rosary, praying the rosary while running would be a good form of prayer. in itself. Supplementation. What do we need to supplement to be able to exercise efficiently? Creatine, for example. It boosts muscular power and brain energy. It's different from a steroid boosting. Creatine is good for the muscle and brain. Trace minerals, especially magnesium. Magnesium is needed in 350 some kind of processes in your mitochondria. So if you're deficient in magnesium, you cannot function well. Your mitochondria cannot produce much of ATP. So you need to supplement magnesium. When your magnesium is deficient, your potassium is also deficient. You have to replace magnesium to be able to recover the potassium. Zinc also is needed, and iron, because iron is needed for the formation of hemoglobin, needed for the transport of oxygen. Antioxidants is very important, especially vitamin C, vitamin E, and polyphenols. And don't forget the glutathione. But remember, supplements support, but they don't replace the real food, prayer, and purpose. So how is concupiscence have to do with exercise? Can exercise be considered as a redemptive power for sinfulness? So let's talk about exercise as corporal mortification. So let's borrow the teachings of St. Thomas Aquinas, for example, and he says, concupiscence is the inclination to sin that remains in us even after baptism. It is not in itself a sin, but as a consequence of original sin, creating disorder in our passions and desire. So how is this relevant? Concupiscence primarily manifests in the threshold of lust. Quote John 2:16. For all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life is not of the Father, but is of the world. Remember, in the Genesis, the fall of Adam and Eve was all from the lust of flesh, lust of the eyes, when Eve was tempted to see the apple, and the pride of life, their temptation to be wiser or even to be like God or even wiser than God. This pride of life. This is not of the Father, but is of the world, according to St. John. Romans 7:15-25. For I do not do what I want, but I do the very thing I hate. I find it to be a law that when I want to do right, evil lies close at hand. This was the struggle of St. Paul. Concupiscence is not itself sin, but leads to sin. According to St. Augustine, he emphasized that concupiscence remains after baptism as a trial and a means of humility. Sinfulness is a path to humility. So mortification as a remedy, and mind you, you don't have to do severe mortification. May I present exercise? Aquinas teaches that mortification, especially corporal mortification, is necessary to reorder the appetites and subject the flesh to the spirit. It is beneficial for you. Exercise heals the body and the soul. He aligns this with St. Paul, who said, I discipline my body and keep it under control, lest after preaching to others, I myself should be disqualified. St. Paul said that in Corinthians 9:27. So and again, what is corporal mortification? It is a voluntary suffering or disciplining the body for the sake of spiritual growth. It's something to offer up. Mortification leads to dark night, a purifying path where the soul is stripped of worldly affections. So exercise might qualify this. Saint Teresa of Avila encouraged discipline, though she warned against excess or pride. Balance is the key. That's why excessive exercise can be harmful. The body must be a servant, not a tyrant, according to Saint Teresa of Avila. The third is to imitate Christ, because Jesus fasted, suffered, and died in the flesh. Mortification allows us to unite with Him. My friend Father Leandro, in one of his homilies, said, he pointed the crucifix and he said, he was so severe in his body. He was so severe on himself. What about us? Let's do exercise to unite with Christ. Modern psychology agrees that delayed gratification, self-discipline, and voluntary hardship like exercise strengthen willpower and mental health. Spiritual mortification, especially when united to a higher purpose to give a transcendental meaning of exercise, becomes a powerful tool for your own interior freedom. This isn't just a matter of productivity, but spiritual warfare. The first minute, the first second, get up, offer it up, The body becomes sluggish, the mind unfocused, and the will weaken, conditions where temptation thrives. In his Rules of Christian Life, Don Bosco urged, as soon as you wake up in the morning, offer your heart to God and get up at once. You conquer your flesh at that moment. He emphasized, immediate rising helps you conquer your body's desire for comfort, which allows you to get tempted. It is an early act of mortification and self-mastery. It sets the tone of virtue and spiritual vigilance throughout the day. So make sense when you wake up, get up, do your morning prayer, and do your push-ups, do your squats. That is very simple. Exercise can be leveled up with the transcendental meaning to be a form of prayer. So what if instead of chasing aesthetics or performance to chisel your hips, your abs, and just that, we offered our training as a form of penance, a corporal mortification. So let's wrap up the key points. In this podcast, we talk about aerobic exercise, which oxygenates the blood of the body and fuels it through fat and glucose. With that, there's consumption of fat and glucose, lowers the blood glucose, and melts away your fats. It triggers central and peripheral adaptation that make you stronger, healthier, and more resilient. It improves your immune function. Exercise enhances cardiovascular, immune, and brain function. And the more you exercise, the more you exercise. Because of BDNF, exercise does that. Exercise improves mood and long-term vitality. We discussed the training zones of exercise, which helps us balance recovery, endurance, and performance. Exercise with proper nutrition and supplementation can optimize our efforts to be healthy. Most importantly, exercise can become a prayer. A daily mortification through exercise can transform both body and soul. Thanks for joining me on this journey through muscle, mitochondria, and mortification. Exercise, beautiful. May your workouts be strong, your motives pure, your intentions holy. May exercise be moved up with a transcendental meaning united to Christ, His suffering. Until next time, take care of your body. Exercise regularly. Get up. Do the heroic minute, as Saint Josemaria Escrivá would say. And don't forget your soul. This has been Medicine and Faith Podcast, episode on exercise and concupiscence. If this episode blessed you, please share, subscribe, and leave a review. Very important. Godspeed. God bless you. Thank you.